With God, there is always more. More love, more life, more freedom. Welcome to Zoe's Exploring More with Michael Thompson. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Our Heavenly Father has provided many delightful inns for us along our journey, but He takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home." Join me and the team as we explore the kingdom together, discovering the deep truths and offering encouragement for the journey. There is always more. Welcome everyone to the Exploring More podcast with Michael Thompson. I'm Michael, and I got my partner in crime, S.J. Jennings, and we have a very special guest and friend, John Eldredge, with us today for this Exploring More podcast. Welcome, John. So honored that you'd be with us for a little bit.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for making some room in your world for me.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah. So, John, how was Easter? How was your time leading up to, and how did you get to celebrate? How did Jesus come for your heart, your family? What was your Easter like?
It was weird. I think like a lot of people's, just weird to be cooped up. The first part of the day was actually kind of rough because of that. Stacy seemed to be coming down with a cold, and we have 3 adult sons, and they all live here in town. They're all married. 2 of them have kids, and my youngest and his wife don't yet. But my youngest, Luke and Liv, were going to come over, and Blaine and them and their little girl were going to come over because we're all self-quarantining. So right. We look at ourselves as kind of a quarantined unit. We're not seeing other people. So it looked like we weren't going to be able to do that. And it was really actually a beautiful moment of Jesus saying, "Will you turn this over to me? Can I have this?" So we did. Stace and I just yielded it. Later in the day, it felt like, no, she's good. We're good. We prayed, and she said, no, have everybody over. So we actually ended up having a really incredible Easter.
Yeah, wow.
Turned on some worship music in the house and kind of had a little dance party, and it was great.
That's great. How old are the grandkids?
So we've got 2 little girls who are 3-ish, and a little boy who's going to be 2 next month.
That's dancing age. They can do that.
They love it.
They can put some moves on. That's good.
How was Easter for you?
We have my middle daughter, Hannah, and my youngest daughter, Abby, 23, 21, home for the quarantine. My oldest is in Atlanta with her husband. So Robin hit the store the day before and decided, I want to make this special for us. So there was Robin's egg casserole and ham biscuits and some really great things that we've had traditionally.
Nice.
She starts kind of putting together the night before. And so girls got up early, about 10:30. So we started with brunch about then. And then we went in. We've done this the last few years. John, we've had some what we call home church. We just circle up at home and bring what we're learning, what God's showing us, and kind of have a buffet of that. And so it's been a bit traditional to show a clip from the stone table and Aslan's resurrection. And then we've looked at some of the other resurrection pieces and celebrated that, read some different things to one another. That was wonderful. And then the surprise, it came up in my YouTube feed. It queued up the Andre Botticelli. Thank you. And so when that came on live at 1:30, I think, from Milan, we put on our Apple TV and watched it. And honestly, John, I've loved his music, but my tears just, when he sang Amazing Grace in the square there, and knowing a little bit about his story, being blinded from a football accident when he was 12 is what I had read about. And he hit that. I was blind, but now I see. He smiled. He knew what he was saying. I was praying, John, in that moment. I said, Jesus, if you would heal him right now, he would go nuts.
Yes.
I wanted that. And then when he didn't, I said, that's okay. It's okay, Jesus. But I was deeply touched by that. That was one of the surprises. We have Easter egg hunts, right, with the Lord, and he puts some things in different places for us to find. And it was a sweet one for Easter, that concert. Yeah.
Oh, you just actually answered a part of a prayer for me. So on Saturday, I was praying about Sunday, praying about Easter in the world and what it means for the church being quarantined. And
right.
I sensed Jesus really wanted to say something. And so I said, Jesus, what are you saying? What do you want for tomorrow? And he said, I want you to pray for a great outpouring of my spirit in the world. I'm like, yes, I'm
Yeah.
in. So like
Yeah.
I started invoking it and praying it
Yeah.
and agreeing with it. I'll be Christful. I heard a couple of things, but like think of what that did for people all over the world,
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so I'm stoked.
It's still climbing a Billboard chart that does not exist. I mean, it's like 30 million views.
Oh, come on, Jesus.
It's phenomenal. Yeah. He starts inside in this old Italian cathedral. I mean, it's just amazing. So it was a very special time. Well, I love being a part of anything like that, John, in the world, in your life, in my heart. That's awesome.
Yeah, man, that's great. Yeah, it was interesting, Michael. You shared that with the team, that experience, and how you had prayed for him to gain his sight in that moment. And probably an hour or so later, and you've probably seen him yourself, but there's a clip of a man, he's been colorblind his whole life. He's probably 70 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And he received those glasses that allowed him to see color for the first time. And it was Easter, and they had Easter eggs and these all colorful different balloons. And I saw his reaction. He took them right back off again. It was like too much. And I can imagine that would almost be what Botticelli's response would be if that had happened in the moment. Is this really happening right now? Am I able to really take this in? It was interesting that found me after you shared that story, Michael.
Mm-hmm.
And John, I'll just share briefly with you, our Easter again felt a little different. We didn't travel anywhere. We normally go and see my mom. She's 86, and I bring her an Easter lily every year. I've been doing that for about 20 years. So I'm going to have to do that later in the year when I go to see her again. So it was a day at home. And, interestingly, Sherry is reading your newest book, Get Your Life Back. And because that kind of theme is over our house right now, we just unplugged from everything. We just spent the day together, and, we did some reading together. We read some scriptures together, and a teaching on warfare found me and the authority that we have in the kingdom. And that was impactful. It was great. We didn't cook a big ham. We actually had pancakes for dinner. So it was,
That's awesome.
It was different, but it was great. It was great.
That's how traditions start, man.
That's exactly right.
All of a sudden, it's one in a row, in a row, and then we're dancing every Easter, or we're having pancakes every Easter.
Yeah, when that happens and the kids are little, they're Jesus pancakes forever. Then Easter pancakes or whatever. It was great.
Well, just to do a quick history for our listeners, I've been friends with John before he knew we were. Back in '99. John, you had come out to speak at some Campus Crusade meetings over in Colorado Springs. And I think that was the first time I had run into you, heard you, and it was the Sacred Romance. Wild at Heart was just moving, just beginning to move. And Campus Crusade as an organization, I mean, Sacred Romance as well as Wild at Heart tended to be passed around and mentioned throughout the staff ranks. And so that's the time Robin and I were on crew staff. And then Wild at Heart was really impactful, John, as it's been to millions. And so thank you for that. I think, as you have experienced probably many, many times as an author, and even with Heart of a Warrior and Search and Rescue, for me, people get to know you a little bit, in what you share. And there must be millions who feel like you're reading their mail when you wrote Wild at Heart. And I love the story behind it. I love the Nelson story. I mean, there's so much history there that I'd love to go to another time. But just for our history, then I stepped into my first boot camp in Fraser up at Frontier, and myself and 3 buddies came out there, and it was life-giving, life-changing. I've shared this story many times. John's talking about the good heart, the redeemed heart. And I just sat there, and it was like John kind of became Charlie Brown's teacher, SJ, wah, wah, wah. And I'm looking in my big NIV study Bible because I'm a Campus Crusade staff guy.
You're a professional Christian. Yeah.
So I got this bit, and I am flipping over in the concordance. I'm looking up the heart going, oh my gosh. And by the time you were done, I think, John, my heart had caught up to it. And Jesus really showed me that this is true. I felt years of growing up in the church, more than I could even articulate at that time, I remember my response was, Lord, if this is true, this changes everything. And so from that day, as we have these incremental, right, movements that are significant in all our timeline, from that day to this day, I can say, John Eldredge, thank you for your mentoring and your apprenticing so many of us out here. Yeah, Zoe has deep roots from the seeds of Ransomed Heart and from the heart that you have shared with Jesus in writing. So thank you for all that you've done, all that you've done.
Yeah, we love the kinship with you guys and love what you're doing. Love your hearts for God, for people. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah. Would you share just in some headlines some of the history and movement of boot camps and any stories that God leads you to share just back in those early 2000s and the Ransomed Heart team and just moving with God into the next thing and the next thing, whatever you want to share of the history of Ransomed Heart and your mission there. We'd love to hear a little bit of that.
Let's tell some Jesus stories
I'd
because
love-
they're super encouraging. So I'm a very young man. I'm on the staff of a church in Southern California, and I'm thinking about going to seminary. And I remember getting on my knees and saying, God, I want to be part of something big. I really felt him say, oh, you will be. Now, it took years for that to unfold. And meanwhile, I got off in the weeds. I went to DC. I started a career there. I was successful in politics and policy, and it was killing me. I was dying because it wasn't me. It was not how I'm wired. And a friend of mine one day, I was telling him my career woes. I'm like, I'm successful and it's killing me. And he said, well, when you go in a bookstore on the weekend, he's like, do you go read policy stuff? Oh, I said, no, I hate that stuff. He says, well, what do you go read? And I'm like, oh, I read on the heart. I read about the heart. And he's like, dude, you are in the wrong profession. So I literally quit my job, went to grad school, got a degree in counseling, moved to Colorado, met Brent Curtis, and we began teaching the sacred romance. I'm a young therapist, and Brent's killed in a climbing accident at our first men's retreat, the very beginning of Wild at Heart, very first retreat. I took over his counseling practice, took a lot of his clients on. And I remember sitting in a counseling session one evening and Jesus speaks and he says, hey, John, you're pretty good at this. And my reaction was pretty good. I'm great at this.
Yeah. SJ, doesn't that sound like I can go left? Doesn't that sound just like that story?
Oh my gosh. Yes, it does.
That's it. Anyway. Yeah.
And,
isn't it fun when we argue with the Lord a little bit? Just like, what?
Yeah. Well, he says, you're pretty good at this. He says, but look what you're doing. You're talking to two people. I want you to talk to a lot more than that. After the session, I'm like, what was that? What was that? And he said, I want you to quit your practice. And there was 2 years where we had no income. We had 3 little boys. We had no medical insurance. We learned a lot about county health care. And we would come home and there would be bags of groceries on the steps. And it would be like, that was it. Like, you had nothing left in the pantry. And Jesus said, I want you to start this thing. I want you to write. I want you to speak. I want you to start Ransomed Heart. And, you know, I don't recommend people living like that. We prayed really hard. We had a lot of confirmation around it. It wasn't just a flippant thing we did. But the beginning of Ransomed Heart was just miracles, miracles after miracles. And I mean, I'm a nobody, right? I'm a counselor in Colorado and I write a book called Wild at Heart and that thing just skyrockets.
Yeah.
It opened up a platform for us to reach a lot of people. That was 20 years ago. And it's still going big guns. I mean, lots has happened since then, but it was a Jesus movement from the beginning. Wild at Heart was a God phenomenon. Most books, the life is 5 months. Wild at Heart is still the leading book for Christian men and just in terms of sales and stuff. So it's a God story. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really a starting point for even now with guys that interact with Zoe. Listeners, for those of you that don't know, Ransomed Heart is a neighboring kingdom, small k, the way we think of it, in the capital K kingdom. John, I was introduced to Wild at Heart at the first Zoe weekend I went to and came home and devoured it twice and then
Yeah.
was ready to go back the next year, and
Yeah.
it's a foundational piece for this. I think maybe you would use this term, John, a revolution that's going on with men that we're
Yeah.
seeing. The hard thing about a revolution is you catch wind of it, it comes across your path somehow, and it feels risky to engage in it. There's a
Yep.
risk involved in getting involved with a revolution. I felt it the first time I read the book, and I know several other guys did too. So that risk too is also very alluring to many,
Yeah.
many men, thousands, millions of men now. Hey listeners, this is SJ, and wanted to let you know that during the COVID-19 crisis, the team here at Zoe has started a community gathering via Zoom, which, if you don't know, is a video conferencing service. We're gathering up on Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time because so many of us are feeling isolated and really need to gather in a community now more than ever. Our gatherings are for both men and women, and usually will include smaller breakout rooms where you can circle up and connect with a smaller group. Our gatherings last about an hour or so, and they've been really powerful thus far. So if you visit zoe.org/Thursday-night-gathering, you can find more details, and you can watch previous recordings on that website as well. Again, that site you want to visit is zoe.org/Thursday-night-gathering for more details.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I relate to that, SJ, because I knew I had to leave some things behind, John. I knew it. And it even cost me my career with Campus Crusade. So I'm not sure, if there's a thankfulness in that. It just was the alteration of things. It was time.
It's costly.
It is. We didn't know where we were necessarily landing. That's when Zoe started. You weren't hiring. You made that clear conference after conference, so there was no place for a groupie like me to go. So you had to you had to create your own band. And so those years, John, of taking and walking with men, being on some of the conference team stuff, the I team with Ransomed Heart and the work crew with Ransomed Heart, I had no idea I was in the carpenter shop in some of those times. And so inviting men to go to boot camp and then them coming home, I had no idea we were forming a posse or a tribe. I mean, it was almost 50 some men that had been out in a few years to Ransomed Heart weekends in those early 2000s. And we came home together and most of it stuck. Most of them stuck. SJ, you dropped into a Zoe weekend, Heart of Aware weekend. I mean, honestly, John, it got so hard to get into the conferences. You made it very clear. You guys do it. You've been so gracious with creating resources that can be given away. You can run this. You guys can do this. And that posture was another one of those that was very strategically helpful for me in keeping the team small, keeping the mission large, and moving in that way. So you modeled a lot of things that I think have proven to be very wise and very helpful, as I've heard you say, we don't want to lose our heart in fighting for the hearts of others. So very, very helpful when it comes to organizational or missional and ministry and strategy and vision and stuff. So a lot of good things, a lot of great books. I remember some of those conferences you were writing the next book, offering Waking the Dead and the Four Streams to us back in, what was that, 05, I think. Watching you and your journey, I think is where I'd love to turn this, SJ, for the podcast. We'll get to Get Your Life Back, the most recent one, but how have the books represented some mile markers for you and your journey? Yeah. Would you just let us inside to that just a little bit?
I'm thinking of John the Baptist's phrase when he says, a man can only have what is given to him from heaven. So in the very young years, I worked on the staff of a local church, and then I worked for a very large Christian organization. And I got to see a lot behind the scenes. And I came away from that with some really good lessons. One of them was, don't teach anything you haven't lived. Because everybody was coming out with these theories, they want to be the most amazing thing, and it's the new this and the wow that. And most of it
is stuff that they've never actually lived. It lacks spiritual authority. So every single one of my books is something that's first been lived. He will take me through something like Wild at Heart was. Wild at Heart began as my own journey, growing up in an alcoholic dad and having a really good grandfather who had a cattle ranch, and just all the pieces of the story that God used to rescue my heart and initiate me as a boy. And that was my story. Like, I needed to go live that story before I could write Wild at Heart. So each one of the books has been like that, and learning to hear the voice of God and going, where has this been all my life? And then writing Walking with God, and on it goes, even right up to this one. I didn't plan on writing Get Your Life Back. It was a story of, I needed this. I got fried in the modern life and the pace and the chaos and the too much technology. And each book has been like that. It's been learn it, live it, and then talk about it.
Yeah. Well done. So glad that's been true. We've talked about on the podcast before, discovery. It doesn't mean it hasn't been there for a long time. It's new to you.
Yep.
And they built a whole channel out of that, for goodness sakes. But when there's been some road signs and there's things that you have left for us in your books, and then reading those paragraphs, but then discovering the truths of those things for ourselves has been phenomenal, magical, life changing. And I think those maps that are in these paragraphs and sentences have been so, so good for so many men. I'm one of the few, John, and I'll take some pride in this, SJ. I'm one of the few that, because I was there so early, we got to kind of wait for the next book, and we got to hear where we were going. Some poor soul who gets in this now, John, I feel like you got a library you got to catch up on, bud. So before we can have some really cool conversations, but no, it's been good. Everyone has been eventful, so I'm grateful for that. If you're good, SJ, any questions before we turn into Get Your Life Back?
John, I love how you shared about being a part of a staff at a church early on. That's part of my story as well. We'll say I've learned some good lessons from that too. I honestly wasn't at a place where I was probably ready to say it that way, but hearing you say it helped me. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's good.
I want to say, to somebody that's listening, and this is the first time they're hearing about John Eldredge, or first time hearing about some of the things we're talking about. John, I know you have a service available online called The Tribe. And did I read where that's discounted right now while all this is going on?
Oh, yeah, we're giving it away.
Yeah. I love that.
Listeners want to jump on that. That's a gold mine of resources and encouragement and help, audio, video.
Oh, yeah.
Basically, it's our whole library, and it's free right now.
Yeah. So I love how that Jesus has given you and Ransomed Heart that spirit, and how that spirit has transferred to us at Zoe too. We're giving away stuff on our website too. And so much of who Zoe is, how we operate, John, comes from what Michael and the rest of the guys learned from you 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So I haven't been able to make it to one of your weekends yet, but I didn't have a chance to at the beginning of the podcast. But I do want to say thank you for what you've done for me. And I consider you a spiritual grandfather, because Michael has walked with me for the last 10 years plus. So he was walking with you for the 10 years before that. And so it's great what you're doing, man. And it's just kingdom minded. I love that.
I heard John say a term one time, maybe from the stage, but it was radical generosity, I think.
Yep. Give it away.
Yeah.
And you've been that way with me, the endorsement of Heart of a Warrior. Yeah, you've given me permission on more than one occasion, like you did to us, SJ, just now. I wasn't surprised. John said, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
That's very consistent for the last several years. So, John, let's talk about Get Your Life Back. I heard you say these words at a Good Soil conference. First time I'd ever heard the word benevolent detachment. I didn't have my phone with me. I guarantee if I would have, I'd have looked it up. Like, what? And I'd love for you to just talk a little bit about benevolent detachment, because it's a big theme in Get Your Life Back.
Yeah. Let me back into it with some story and some data. So when 9/11 happened, They did some research afterwards, and they discovered that people that watched the Twin Towers go down on TV at home experienced the same PTSD as people who were there on the street in New York.
Wow.
What we're learning about the consumption of media and the way that it actually does traumatize the soul. Mm-hmm. Just going to connect some really interesting dots. There was a British anthropologist, Robin Dunbar, who did some fascinating research, first on the size of the human brain and kind of the capacity we have for relationship. And then he looked at villages over human history, and he kind of determined this famous number, Dunbar's number. We're wired for about 150 people to kind of live in a community, to carry their sorrows and know their joys and that sort of thing. And so in the modern era, you know, that little computer you carry around in your pocket every day, our smartphones, we are getting the information and the news and the heartbreak of the entire world delivered to us daily. And now with the pandemic, it's even worse. I mean, everybody's glued to the news. Mm-hmm. How many people have died in New York? How many people have died in Rome? You know, what's happening in Spain with the trauma centers? I just got to say, that is brutal on the human psyche and the human heart. And then you add to that good people, Christian people who want to care. You add to it the human trafficking and the suffering of persecuted Christians in Pakistan and different places. And it is overload. People are on empathy overload. I would just get home at night and I'd just be cooked. I would be totally fried from a day of really good, important things, but just hearing too much, knowing too much, too many people's stories, too much heartbreak. And so Jesus began to teach me benevolent detachment. The idea of being benevolent, it's kindness, it's love, it's not cynicism, I'm not angry, I'm not checking out, but detachment of you're never meant to carry all this. Mm-hmm. And this stuff is like Velcro. I mean, it will jump on you and then, you know, it just stays with you and it builds up like those 9/11 studies, you know, and you're just living with the weight of the world. Where's the pandemic going? Will we get vaccines? What's going to happen to the economy? All that. I would pull in the driveway at the end of the day, and I'd turn the engine off, and Jesus would say, just sit here. Don't get out of your car. And I would just sit in my car. And he would say, now give everyone and everything to me. Mm-hmm. Give everyone and everything to me. And I'd just sit in my truck and go, okay, Jesus, that meeting I just came out of, I give everyone and everything to you. My kids, I give everyone and everything to you. The world, even the mission, even, you know, the thing I care about, I give everyone and everything to you. And the fruit of it is almost instantaneous. This isn't like taking your vitamins and, you know, 6 months later, you begin to feel better. This is in the moment, I'm realizing, oh my goodness, I have been carrying so much. And he kept this up for more than a year. He just continued to say, just give everyone and everything to me. At bedtime, we'd be praying our prayers, give everyone and everything to me. And so then I started unpacking it and writing on it. And, you know, it's all through the scriptures. 1 Peter 5:17, cast your cares upon the Lord because he cares for you. There is a rich scriptural tradition of this, truly letting Christ bear our burdens. And in the mad world that we live in, I would just say it's like times 10. Yeah. We need to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're referring, John, to the Pause app that you guys developed.
What John's describing,
right?
He and Ransomed Heart made available for a practice. And I love that word, the art, the practice, something that people can begin to learn with the help of this app. So yeah, John.
Thanks, Scott. Because this is another fun Jesus story.
Great.
It's called the 1 Minute Pause. And the problem is, you know, the people that are interested in like mindfulness apps or whatever, I need some help calming down. I need some help, like just settling. The offering is not very good. They're pretty chaotic. Most of them are pretty new agey. There wasn't just a good, simple, just give me one thing to do, right?
Yeah.
I don't want 16 choices. Just give me one thing. And so the 1 minute pause app, super simple. There's a 1 minute, a 3 minute, a 5, and a 10. Beautiful music, nature photography,
Yeah.
and then that simple prayer. I was just praying, Jesus, I give everyone and everything to you. We built the app in November, tested it through Christmas, released it in January, right before the pandemic hits. And now we are getting 1,000 downloads a day.
Wow.
People are stressed. This whole thing is super stressful.
Mm-hmm.
Massive uncertainty. And people are craving something to just center me in Jesus for a second. Just get me out of the news, get me out of the chaos, just center me in Christ. And when we built the app, the 1 and the 3 minute are easy and fun to do. The 5 and the 10, I thought nobody's going to do the 10-minute pause. In this world, nobody pauses for 10 minutes, right? It sounds like I want you to quit your job. It really asking
I'm with
people
you.
in this world, I want you to take 10 minutes and just pause. During the pandemic, the 10-minute pause is off the charts. I mean, it's ridiculous. I don't know. We have like 2 million minutes logged of people using that. It's just so beautiful.
Yeah.
And God knew. He's like, I want you to build this. It's kind of like the ark, you know?
Sure.
The storm's coming.
Yeah. It's absolutely, anointed for such a time. Let's stay with the 10-minute app. Immediately when I started practicing, I was a little bit of a latecomer, wasn't there in January, but as I got it downloaded and started practicing, it just reminded me of soaking, that practice of just presence and coming back to benevolent, being kind to my own heart about the coming back and learning how to let my mind drift and see the gift of that. Okay, come back to your voice or to the music. It was a very handy, makes it sound so small, but it's so helpful, so good to learn this practice. But if you could talk a little bit more, John, about the 10-minute, the one that surprised you, because there's a break in there. You're not even teaching them about how to listen to Jesus. You're just tossing them in the water and saying, you can swim, go ahead. Just ask Jesus. Just ask him. Ask him which one of these 3. I would love for you to talk about those 3 for a minute. And what happens
it's kind of a choose your own adventure halfway through. So the 10-minute is this beautiful lingering 5-minute pause, lovely, spacious, and then you get a choice and you can choose guidance. I need guidance from God. I need help. I've got decisions to make. I need him to speak to me. Or I need inner healing. I'm aware of some fear. I'm aware of some pain. I need healing. Or I just need to worship right now. I just need to love God and worship. And then choosing one of those in the middle of the 10-minute takes you into that path. And then you get 5 more minutes of guided psalms, some prayers, some reflection that kind of take you into, I need to hear from you on this question, or I need you to come into this wound in my soul, or I just need to worship you, God. I just need to declare you're good. And I'm cracking up. I just thought nobody was going to use the 10-minute. I really did. And it's been wildly successful.
Tune in next week to hear the second part of our conversation with John Eldredge.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Exploring More. The landing page for this podcast is zoe.org/podcast. That's ZOWEH.org/podcast, where you can find the show notes and various platforms to which we broadcast. You can also find us and the Life of More by visiting Zoe on YouVersion Bible app, Right Now Media, our Facebook page, and Zoe on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, with God there is always more, and you were made for more.